Understanding is the first step to acceptance, and only with acceptance can there be recovery. Albus Dumbledore. Bending, Not Breaking. Season 2, Episode 7. Zuko Alone. And we're back again for another episode of Bending, Not Breaking. Season 2, Episode 7.
They're going to think we recorded that because you do it every single time.
Which one?
And we're back to...
Well, we are back, and I'm excited about it.
Cool.
I don't get why that would be a bad thing.
This is Ben Pruitt talking.
And this is Sunshine Mayfield, and this is another episode of Bending Not Breaking. And we're excited to be here.
We're glad you're listening.
Yeah, we're also glad that we have our third man in the studio, Max Gongaware. Hello, Max.
Hello.
What have you been up to on this wonderful weekend since we recorded last? You've had a week. Things have been going on. Anything exciting?
No, same old stuff. You know how that goes.
I do. Stuff
Same
goes
old, same old.
and same old things. What about you, Ben? Anything fun or exciting happened this past week? Anything new that you've been doing?
My dog has pneumonia.
That's no fun.
I found out that I can pay for her meds at a human pharmacy for like a fourth of the cost.
Also, and how many like did you find this out before you bought non-human pharmacy meds, or like?
Oh yeah, I found that way after. I spent about $700 over the past month on medication, and now I realize that I could spend like $60.
That's unfortunate. I'm sorry that happened.
I'm really kind of frustrated with that.
I imagine so.
I haven't accepted it yet.
Well, that goes perfect into our lens, which, as you just said, is what?
Acceptance.
Acceptance.
Pneumonia.
No. We could. What would a lens of pneumonia be about?
Max?
Well,
And that's the stuff in Windex, right?
Yeah.
a lens of pneumonia would require that your lungs have water in them.
While you watch Avatar.
Is that what the show's called?
Max, you've been here for a full 6 episodes already. Have you not watched 1 minute of Avatar: The Last Airbender?
What do you think?
Wait, but really, you haven't seen 1 minute of it? Like, even in passing while we've been watching it?
No, I don't watch it while y'all are watching it. I don't live with you.
But, like, you used to. I watched it then.
In the other room, usually.
That's true.
All right.
I did buy a separate television.
Max, you should watch the show. It's really, really good. Everyone tweet at us at the Archivy and tell Max how much he should watch the show.
This is really a case study in trying to see if we can get a stranger to Avatar watch it.
I think that actually could be a fun for one of our next voicemails. We want to hear your 1 minute pitch to Max Gongaware on why he needs to watch Avatar: The Last Airbender.
That could be good.
And I will play that. So that's what we want a future voicemail to be, is your 1 minute pitch to Max Gongaware on why he should watch Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I wouldn't waste your time, folks.
No, please do that, and we're going to see if we can get him to watch some Avatar. But because you haven't seen...
To be fair, I also haven't seen James Cameron's Avatar.
That's mediocre at best.
That's on Disney Plus. It's good. It was great at the time, and I think it with rewatches it drops a little bit, but it's fine. It's like fun.
I was never super impressed.
You like Pocahontas, right? It's a similar story.
What?
It's similar.
Okay.
That's a thing. That is all right. Well, and we'll talk about that. But because you haven't seen anything, Max from Avatar, it is time for Max's uninformed recap.
Recap.
So remember, we will give you the first scene, the last scene, 5 keywords, and you will have to weave us the story of what you think happens in this episode of Zuko Alone. Are you ready?
Yep.
As ready as you'll ever be. Opening scene, skipping the recap that happens of previously on Avatar, Zuko is traveling and debates on stealing food that is cooking, but notices that it belongs to a pregnant woman and what we assume to be her partner. The final episode is Zuko is forced to leave town after community members find out who he truly is. Your 5 keywords are flashback, mother, soldiers, death, and knife. Do you need any of that over again?
I sure don't.
Okay. You've got 47 seconds.
Oh, my time limit has also been extinguished slightly.
Yeah, slightly. But we're dealing with a
is
lot of
this
the Fire Nation, so
is this
extinguished is a good word for
decision that has been made partly with ratings, and like the ratings have influenced this decision?
No one has told me that they do not like this segment.
So why do I have 13 less? Why do I have 13 less
I've only
seconds?
received positive feedback on it.
Why do I have 13 less seconds?
I just picked an arbitrary number, Max.
It's always been 60 seconds.
Okay,
You have 60 seconds starting now on your mark, get set, go.
Okay, so the beginning of this episode, which is called Zuko Alone, starts with Zuko traveling and debating on whether or not to steal some food from a pregnant woman. Well, he steals some food and then realizes that it's a pregnant woman. And he has this flashback of his own mother. It's a flashback from when he was in the womb with his mother. And
Zuko alone in the womb.
Zuko alone in the womb.
Right.
If you could let me have
is
my
Max's
60
recap.
seconds, that'd be great. Thank you so much. I'm gonna add 10 more seconds to my total time, please. So he has this flashback in the womb of his own mother, and shortly after being born, his mother was actually killed by some soldiers with a death knife. And that takes care of all 5 keywords. And it was just like I don't, how long are the episodes of this show?
Like 24 minutes.
Yeah, so it was like a 23.5-minute flashback where just all that happened. And then at the very end, the community members find out who he is because he's been flashbacking. He's like, the community members are like, oh, that's that guy who has 23-minute flashbacks. And he's forced to leave town.
That was with your 10 seconds.
That was with your 10 seconds added.
Nailed it.
Yeah, well done. Well done. Ben Pruitt, would you like to give the real recap?
I forgot what happened.
Would you like me to give the 30-second recap?
Yeah.
All right.
On your mark. Get set. Go.
We see episode recaps of the Agni Kai and him leaving Iroh and his thoughts on his sister. We see Zuko take a journey where he debates stealing food from a couple with a baby, but then he doesn't. And then Zuko is in and out of consciousness when he's riding on his chocobo and he sees visions of his mother. He comes upon a village and has a rough go with some army soldiers after a little child throws an egg at them, but he doesn't rat the little kid out. Lee invites Zuko back to his family farm after he didn't rat him out, and then Zuko helps with some chores on the farm, and Lee asks him about his past, so we get more
5,
flashbacks
4,
about him being a mother and
3,
then throwing a
2,
bread at turtle ducks or
1.
rocket turtle ducks and stuff with the Zula goes on. And then
Wow, I finished my version of the episode in time, at least.
and then there's more stuff that goes on. Ultimately, though, he takes down the soldiers that are being rude. But then the community learns who he is and kicks him out.
Yeah, they stop accepting him.
I think the moral of the story, I don't want to step on y'all's toenails, but the moral of the story is to never show people who you really are.
I don't think that is... I thoroughly disagree.
Yeah, I think that might be the opposite of what I was
Thoroughly disagree.
I don't know. See, based on my understanding of this Avatar, my long-running understanding of the Avatars and their ability to bend but not break, you should never be who you truly are.
You've heard it from Max, folks.
I disagree.
Y'all can go ahead and turn off the episode now.
There's another reason for you to try and convince Max to watch the show.
That's right.
Yeah, help me be who I really am.
So with the...
An Avatar lover.
You could be, though. The issue is that you don't know that you...
I don't know what love is.
I don't know what love is. Point.
Okay, so... Let's talk a little bit about acceptance.
What does acceptance mean?
That's a great question. I don't know. And so I guess I approached this with, like, especially knowing it's Zuko's kind of, like, character arc story. We get none of the gang in this episode.
No gang.
And so we know it's all about Zuko.
The episode is called Zuko Alone.
Right. Again, keywords and context clues is what I'm pulling from here. And so we already know that he has been looking for acceptance from his family specifically his father, for the entirety of season 1. So there's a lot.
Is that
of
what he's looking for?
I think so. We've talked about that. About him in search of being accepted by his family.
I mean, all he talks about is his honor.
His honor. I have to find the Avatar
To restore my
to
honor.
restore my honor.
So, how is that acceptance?
So he can be accepted by his father.
Ah, the implied stuff that's underneath.
It's very layered, like a parfait or an onion or an ogre. And so
Or Max.
I think I approached it expecting there to be a lot of him searching for acceptance from others, and honestly, I think it's a lot about him needing to accept himself for who he is, and I don't know if we get moments of that, or do we get moments of that, but there's stuff that goes into that I think is definitely helpful.
For me, the key thing about acceptance is realizing that there has to be something to accept in order for acceptance to be a thing. There has to be something that is not acceptable for acceptance to occur.
Right.
And so for me,
I'll get into that even more later.
I find that rule to be really interesting about acceptance, because I think acceptance is often considered a positive thing. And sometimes I feel like acceptance is patronizing and belittling, and takes me out of seeing the realness of people and things.
So talk to me more about that. When does acceptance come off as patronizing or belittling, to use the words? When have you felt that? What was going on?
So I think I've always been different than the average Joe. I'm average in many ways, but I'm also super not average in plenty of others. And I think one of the things that has bothered me is I often get compliments of like, you are so you. You are just so you, and that's awesome. And I'm like, in my head, expletive, like screw you kind of a deal. Because to me, yeah, I am so me. And that as a form of a compliment is also saying you are so you, meaning you are so different. And feeling like I am not a part of the group because of who I am really hurts.
So in those instances, it's more ostracizing than it is welcoming.
Well, and that wasn't like,
it's not inclusive to make a comment like that.
I think the subtext is I accept you despite your faults, despite these things.
And you just live yourself like that, knowing all that. And
oh, bless your
knowing
heart.
that you're weird, and you do it anyway.
Oh yeah, bless your heart. I love you. You're so great. Bless your heart. But really, I'm just like, yeah, you can just take that and shove it down your throat.
I feel very similar when like I get a comment from someone when I'm working out, and I work out pretty regularly, but I'm a bigger dude.
Good for you.
And someone comes up and they're like, "Good for you! I totally didn't expect to see you in here," and like that's what it feels like to me, and does come off as very patronizing, and that might not be the intent.
And that's not.
I doubt that would be the intent.
Yeah, and
right?
that's my story. My story is that when they say, you know what, I accept you. The story in my head is, oh, there's something that you needed to accept. There's something that you didn't accept before, but now you're just gonna like
you're okay with it.
You're okay with it now, and so there's just a lot. I have trouble with it. I have issues with acceptance.
And how do we get around that? Because really, that is the story that you or I are telling ourselves in those moments, and it is not always the intent of someone. Now, some people do. They sit there and say like, that person's weird, but like, good for them for being exactly who they are, I guess, is like the context that they say things with.
We talked about this before, I think, but there's a thing called the Riddle homophobia scale. I think we've talked about it before, but on the scale, it's a scale of not homophobic to homophobic, right? Or vice versa,
yes,
from homophobic to not homophobic. And
1 is as homophobic as you can be.
Yeah, 1 is really
homophobic. 8 is
homophobic.
as supportive as you can be.
Yeah, nurturing, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens is acceptance is in the middle.
I think it's 4.
Yeah.
Which is still considered
homophobic.
Yeah.
Right? It's still considered, and I think this applies to whatever. It doesn't have to be just about homophobia or transphobia or any kind of phobia. It can be about really anything. If I have to be accepted or tolerated or whatever it is, that is just downright not nurturing and not helping me flourish as a human being, right? And so the fact that Zuko is continuously looking for acceptance from someone who is continuing to not even accept him, not even tolerate him. In fact, he's frankly like he's banished his own child, right? It seems like this guy and Zuko trying to find that from him is just not helpful in any way.
Yeah, and to add even more context, this was written as a homophobic scale, but when you read it, it kind of could be the way that we treat people scale.
Yeah.
And what's the most supportive to the least supportive to the most supportive? So the first number one's repulsion, number 2 is pity, number 3 is tolerance, number 4 is acceptance, and then you get into the positive attributes of sides, which is support, admiration, appreciation, and nurturance. And so you can see how characters fall under this, right? You can see the characters that pity Zuko along the way. You can see the characters that are repulsed by Zuko. You can see the characters that nurture him and appreciate him. And when you line those characters up, when we watch as the audience, we sit there and go, yeah, I wonder where Azula falls on this scale.
Yeah.
And I wonder where Iroh falls on this scale.
Absolutely.
Because they are absolute ends of the spectrum when it comes to the way that they support Zuko.
And I think what makes me most curious about that is why and how do people move on this scale, and how quickly do they move because of certain pieces of information that they receive?
They gain more information, they learn more context, they experience life with that person in a closer range.
Yeah. How fast does that change, and why? And I'm really curious and interested in figuring that out.
Yeah, because I don't have the answer to that. And I would assume the more it's there's a Brene Brown quote out there.
I don't know if you've heard of her.
People are hard to hate close up, and so I think that's probably one of the most telling.
Braving the wilderness.
That the more time you spend with someone, the tougher they are to hate. Right, the more that you're in conversations with them, and living side by side. And so I would argue that's probably the main way, is to talk to people more, ask questions, ask the question, tell me more.
100%.
After watching this episode, I wanted to kind of have an understanding, and I searched kind of what is the path to self-acceptance, or to, and there's an article by Leon Seltzer, who's a psychologist from Psychology Today, and he talks specifically about what's the first step in becoming more self-accepting, and it's exactly what you said, right? It's this: I have to accept that there are things that I've done in my past, or that there are things to accept that have already happened, that aren't indicative of who I am as a character, as a person, or do not affect my value.
There's a person that's really awesome. Her name's Brene Brown. The irony is that we attempt to disown our difficult stories to appear more whole or more acceptable. But our wholeness, even our wholeheartedness, actually depends on the integration of all of our experiences. Brene Brown.
I don't know if you've heard of her.
Yeah, she's pretty great.
But we get this moment where he's really saying, and Brene's saying, is that you've got to accept that these things are a part of your past and a part of what you've done. What his first thing is what defines your self-acceptance is what we see throughout the entire episode here with Zuko Alone. The way that you are parented, or the way that adults create identity around you as you are growing up, specifically before the age of 8, your brain is not creating an identity. It is like a sponge breathing in what other people are saying your identity is.
Yeah.
So if you have a parent who does a really good job of saying things like, you are a wonderful, caring child, but you made a poor decision, versus you are dumb for making that decision.
Yep.
It is going to drastically affect the way that you are as a child. in the way that you grow up, in the way that you see yourselves, and whether or not that you have this self-acceptance that allows you to understand that the mistakes that you make don't necessarily define who you are if you can keep those mistakes from happening over and over and over.
One of my favorite podcasters is named Hillary McBride, and she's a part of the Liturgist podcasts. She's also does a podcast called Other People's Problems, where she kind of exposes therapy for what it is and talks about it and normalizes people who are in therapy, and it's phenomenal. Both of those podcasts are excellent. But the episode that I'm about to reference is from the Liturgist podcast, which is episode on shame. And she talks about how this concept that you're talking about, which is essentially that our social identity is formed in a way around if we imagine ourselves as a mirror, and if we imagine the people around us as mirrors. We can look into a mirror and see that we are whole, and we see our whole selves, we see who we really are. Or we can look into a mirror that is broken, and we could see ourselves in a broken way based off the reflection that others put back onto us. And so we are who we are, right? But the people who are reflecting back onto us who we are is what we see, and therefore that is what forms our identity. And so what we see and know is based off of the people around us. And that is drastic before 8, but it is still essential to recognize as you get past 8, right? As you become a fully formed adult, who you surround yourself by determines how you see yourself, because the only way you can see yourself is through other people's eyes. If you think about it, Hillary talks about how like you have never truly seen your own face. You've seen a reflection of your face. You've seen pictures of your face, but you've never seen your own face. The only way you will have seen that, there is no way. There's no way you can have done it, right?
Yeah, I mean, Co would have to steal your literal face.
But then you wouldn't have eyes, so you couldn't see it anyway,
man.
right? And so legit,
Stinking Co.
you've never been able to see your face, and it's the same way with ourselves. Like you've never really been able to see yourself the way that other people can. And I am drastically butchering it in terms of the way Hillary says it. It's phenomenal, and I highly recommend listening to that whole episode. But I just think it's really poignant for what you were just talking about and what we're looking at with Zuko here.
And let's talk more about Zuko, and let's talk more about this episode. So what are moments for you, whether they were in flashbacks or in the present day, where you sit there and you see really this lens of acceptance highlighted?
Okay, so there are several moments that come to mind. There's a moment in the beginning where Zuko says, like, I've always had to struggle and fight, and that's how I became who I am, or something along those lines.
That was in the recap from after he kidnaps Aang and gets put in, like, the ice storm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always had to struggle and fight, and, like, that's my identity, is essentially what he's saying. And for me, there's a really interesting thought process there. Like, he has accepted that his life will be hard when, frankly, his life doesn't have to be hard in the way that he's making it hard. And so this is really troublesome, because what we see throughout this whole series is Zuko is grappling with not only his struggle for love, belonging, and acceptance from someone who's not willing to give it to him, but he's also continuing to try. And as soon as he stops continuing to look for that, that's when his path changes. That's when he joins the Avatar, spoiler alert, and that's when he starts working towards a different goal. And so to me, one of the things that comes to mind is when you are sitting in a briar patch and you're complaining about the briars, you can like, okay, I'm going to move this briar patch, I'm going to move this one, I'm going to move this one, I'm going to try this, but then you start to hurt yourself this way, or you could get out of the briar patch. Right? Quit hurting yourself. Why are you putting yourself in a situation and keeping yourself in a situation?
If you've got the resources to get out of the briar patch.
And some people don't even know they're in a briar patch, right? But it's one of those things where as soon as he realizes that he's in a briar patch, he gets out. It takes him a long time. But I think that's what's so special about this whole story, is seeing Zuko realize that he's sitting in a briar patch and he can walk out.
And do you feel like he noted, like, finds that out by the end of it? Do you feel like that he understands that by the end of this episode?
Not this episode, no, but I do think that this is the beginning, and that quote is what clued me in. Like, that quote reminded me of that whole thought process.
Well, and so I think there's moments where he's not looking for acceptance in this episode, and those are the moments you see him act in a way that you would consider
You see him smile.
positive or
Yeah.
smiling, right? So, like, he is clearly not looking for acceptance from the soldiers when he stands them down the first or the second or the third time. He's not looking for their acceptance. He's looking to do what's right and what he knows is what's right in those moments. And in those moments, he comes out as the bigger person and comes off as caring and comes off as supportive and clearly has those traits inside
And
of
the
him.
whole town sees that.
And the whole town sees that in him and says stuff like they're rooting for him.
Yep,
They're inviting
they're
him back.
clapping,
They're
yeah.
inviting him back to the farm. He's helping with chores. He's not looking to be accepted in those moments because he's even trying to get out of that situation where they're like, "You want to stay at the farm?" And he's like, "Nope, I've got things to do." And then Lee's mom makes a really inclusive gesture by being like, "Well, hey, why don't you help with some of the chores we got going around here, and then we'll eat dinner."
That always makes me, that whole concept, because that's a trope that happens. That is a dignity trope where offering, "Hey, come and have dinner," and then like, no. Okay, why don't you work for your dinner and then you can have dinner? Like, okay.
That's a pride thing. I'm not taking from you.
Yeah,
right?
I'm not gonna. Yeah, and so she eases that burden by saying, "Well, why don't you work for it?" And that makes it easier for Zuko to accept, right? That kind of acceptance makes it so that he doesn't want to take pity, right? Pity is number 2 on the scale. He doesn't want pity. He wants dignity.
Does that also come from a place of you are clearly not thriving right now, and I don't want my burden to be your burden?
Absolutely.
So it's not even less of pity, but it's this place of like, I don't want to be a burden on you. You clearly have your stuff that you're going through. I don't want to add to that. Let me just go. Then it turns into, why don't you help us? Why don't you ease that burden a little bit and then stick around for dinner? And that could also be the flip side of that coin.
Well, and there's so many different stories that could happen in that moment to describe and like think about like why did she do it that way. But for me, the story is he doesn't want to take a handout, right?
Sure.
And I imagine that's the dominant story for people watching,
I think so.
right? I would imagine that's true. And if it's not, I want to hear from you. What was the story that's in your head for Zuko in that moment, right?
What does this say about the accepting nature of what needs? So, like, he's accepted by this family at this time,
And almost immediately.
but it's partly because of what he did.
Yeah,
It's because of the actions that he took that
little
showed
brother.
that Lee said, like, I can likely trust you.
Yeah.
But then also, mom makes pleas to make sure she's creating a welcoming and opening space to be accepted into, which I think is really important.
Well, and then Dad makes it really easy for him to stay accepted by making it so that he didn't have to reveal any information.
Yep, you don't have to tell me your name.
That trust was there.
Yeah, let his past be his past. That's not your thing to ask questions about, Lee, right? Like,
Yeah.
so you get these moments of that family is creating a welcoming space with it, which is equally as important as someone who is trying to make sure that they are being vulnerable and extending trust to be into that space to be accepted.
Yeah, I think it's just really interesting if we jump ahead to where, like, we look at where we are now. Zuko is not only accepted, but feels like he could, like, if he wanted to, he could probably stay there a while. He could probably live with this family, right? It feels that way. And at the end, as soon as they find out that he's the banished Fire Lord's son, frankly, that he can firebend it all, and that they just as soon as they find out who he is, all of that is just erased.
Based off of historical data, based off of experiences they've had with people from the Fire Nation, based off of...
Well, it feels like those things completely overrode the fact...
all the
good things that he had done. And, like, they just forgot how they were treating him before, right? He's the same person. And it just strikes me, like, when have I done that? When have I heard something and my mind has shifted so quickly that I lost all of the evidence that was in front of me showing the opposite was true?
I don't know, and I wonder if this actually goes directly against Max's argument from earlier about being your authentic self. This all happens once Zuko goes, I am Prince Zuko, son of Ursa and Fire Lord Ozai, and I'm the prince and heir to the throne, which I would argue that's not his authentic self. Those are all titles that have been given to him.
You
But
know-
when he's playing that version, that's not necessarily his most authentic and best version of himself.
I think I'm going to push back on that. I think that is who he is. He is the Fire Lord's son.
Yeah, but I would argue that is the mask, and we've talked about him wearing mask, similar to Toph being the Beifong's daughter, and that being a role that she is, the Beifong's daughter and a part of this rich family, but her true most authentic version of herself is the Blind Bandit and the way that she was when she was in that tournament. And I would argue the same for Zuko, that when he is trying to stand up to and be accepted by his father and be what his father is expecting him to be, he is not living into himself authentically.
I agree with that. I don't think him proclaiming that he's the Fire Lord's son is that. I think that he's saying, in my mind, to me, that feels like him saying, yes, I am the Fire Lord's son. Yes, I am these things. But that's not, I don't feel like it's a period. Right? I don't feel like it's I am these things and that's the end of who I am, right? I feel like it's him saying these things in addition to what you've already seen.
Right.
It's not this and this alone. It's this and everything else that you have seen of me. You should, yes, I am these things which are scary and not okay, and I don't love them. That's why I was hiding them from you. But it's who I am.
Yeah.
Right?
I can get behind that argument. Unfortunately, the town sees just the back end of that, right?
Of course, absolutely. And I 100% agree that him, even from the first season, that part of him is not who he really is.
Because what's the difference between that and saying, and y'all, I'm Prince Zuko, in that versus the proclamation, the herald of, this is my royalness.
Well, to me, it feels like you imagine breaking through a dam. It all comes pouring out.
Right.
It's not something that I'm going to let this slip in this one little bit. It's like, oh no, all of this comes pouring out because I've been holding it back for so long that I can't anymore. Right? And it all slips out and it all comes out pouring out of him, and he just wants to be accepted. He's not even looking for nurturing yet. He's looking for acceptance.
Yeah. Well, and the fact because he's so focused on wanting that acceptance, he ignores the nurturing, and he ignores the admiration.
We accept the love we think we deserve.
Exactly. Which is not Brene Brown.
Stephen Chbosky.
Perks of being a wallflower.
So good.
But it's because he is so heavily focused on that level 4 level of the scale that we talked about earlier. He's ignoring when he's being given 8 and 7 and 6. Because we see that in moments. We see that in moments of really in the way that Iroh talks to him throughout the entire of the first season.
Even Mom talked to him in his flashbacks.
There's even moments where Aang, I think, admires Zuko.
We could have been friends.
Could we have been friends? When he gets saved by Zuko, when Zuko's the Blue Spirit, I think you would have to agree that Aang admires Zuko for what he did in that moment. But Zuko does not see those things because he's so focused on being accepted. And so what's the solution to that? When you're in the briar patch, how do you know to get out of it? And is that through the people around you to help do that? And do we see that in this episode anywhere?
Well, shame is a social wound, and it requires a social balm. So shame is something that we experience alone, but comes from other people. And so the remedy for that also comes from other people. And that's what makes shame so scary, because we feel like we're experiencing it alone. We feel like we are, and that's why it's Zuko alone, right? We feel,
and he doesn't have to be.
Yeah, he doesn't. He left Iroh because of the things that he's going through, right? Yeah. The next episode, there's a lot of really good one-liners that would be really poignant for this episode.
Zuko to hear
right now.
Which Toph hears them then.
Yeah, but stay tuned for next episode.
But you want it to be Zuko alone, parentheses, when will he get it? He doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
As we know, that's one of the myths of vulnerability, is that I can do this alone.
Yep. Myth.
And you can't. And that's not to say that you're helpless, or that's not to say that you aren't strong, but we are hardwired for connection, and we need the support of others, and we need to support others. That's the only way to get through this life.
Yeah. So I want to dive into the flashbacks now.
Ooh, because I think we're how long are we in, Max? We're a good ways in right now, and we've
35 minutes.
yeah, let's get into those flashbacks, shall we?
All right. So let's start off with the fact that Azula is a sociopath.
You are not in a place where you can diagnose that. You do not have that expertise.
I feel like,
and there's a danger.
She's a
There's a danger. There is a danger in diagnosing when you don't have that. But yes, my assumption. What's the most generous assumption you can give to Azula?
Sociopath.
She is desperately searching for the acceptance of her father as well, and feels like she can only do that if she puts down the firstborn.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Okay. So you're right. Thank you for holding me accountable. I was dehumanizing Azula because she's less than human, but
you can't say those things. We spend episodes talking about that and working on that.
I'm working on it. I'm sorry.
But yeah, she says very unkind things.
She does have poor behavior.
She makes up
and she's
stories, and she hurts
Animals.
other people. Animals and her friends.
Those are signs of sociopaths.
And we cannot diagnose her as we are not experts. Now, if someone who listens to the show is an expert and would like to diagnose her behavior, we would love to hear about it.
Anyway.
But yes, she's very unkind.
Well, to me, I think what's most striking about
Makes
Azula
unkind decisions.
is that to me, it seems like she's a master manipulator, even at a very young age. And what are they? How old are they in this? Like,
Zuko's got to be 8 or 9, and so that means she's 7 or 8.
Yeah,
she's a year younger.
She is a master manipulator.
That moment where you see her be like, "Oh, watch this! I'm gonna get my mom right now," and tells that to Ty Lee, and then plays it. Oh, I just want to hang out with my brother. Isn't it good for us to spend time together?
Yeah, and mom falls right in,
as we do. Right? As adults do.
Yeah.
As anyone does when you don't have context around the entire situation.
And it strikes me as so interesting because, like, we need to trust when children tell us things because it's the things we don't see that they're telling us about, right? Zuko running away saying girls are crazy, we shouldn't write that off and say, oh, boys will be boys, girls will be girls.
Ugh, worst.
We need to inspect, we need to find out, we need to trust but verify. And understand what's going on with our kids. Because otherwise, things like that happen, go unnoticed, and then they grow up into that, and we haven't been able to help them.
Correct. And Azula just plays into that. I mean, we even get a moment where Azula runs out of the room after picking on Zuko or fighting with Zuko, and Ursa even says, What is wrong with that child?
Yeah, this is right after she talks about Azulon's going to die, and he's going to be replaced by a really powerful Fire Lord, and she gets like reprimanded and said Azula, and then she just like walks out with this smug grin on her face. And
we're also talking about moments where Azula has been like, I hope Iroh dies so Dad can be the Fire Lord.
Exactly.
And like moments like that's not exactly how she words it, but it's pretty much like, what if Iroh dies when he's out at war, or Pops gets to be the Fire Lord? And we know that Iroh, I would imagine, out of the family life, because Ursa's very kind and very caring.
We see her caring in every moment with Zuko. I'll
say this, there might be some spoilers to the comic book The Search in a conversation that we're about to have, so if you are reading that comic book or have not read that comic book and want to, this is one of the Avatar comic books that takes place after the show ends, that they came out with, but it talks a lot about Ursa's past, so spoiler alert for this, but we find out the way that she kind of gets into the Fire Lord Ozai's network is she's married into it by her family, essentially. Azulon comes down, it's told by the sages that you need to find the granddaughter of Roku, and they essentially marry her off into this family. So she is this kind and loving person, and so Iroh's got to be the only other person like that in the family for the most part. And so to hear your own daughter wishing for his death has to be pretty hard.
Yeah.
And so we see all these moments with Azula where we're like, all right, cool. Don't love that character.
Yeah. Yeah, they do a really good job of making you not want to like Azula. So, they've succeeded with me.
She's not a fan.
I have two more things I want to talk about.
Let's do it.
The first one is Iroh's letter that includes gifts for Azula and Zuko.
Very gendered gifts.
So, I have a theory about that. And tell me how you think about this. I have two readings of it. One is that he is in his he's still a part of the Fire Nation. He still hasn't like learned his lessons yet. He still hasn't he's still growing as an adult, and so he's playing into the gender norms. Gives Zuko, because he's a boy, a dagger, and gives Azula, because she's a girl, a doll. Right? That to me is living into the patriarchy. It feels like he is just playing into it, and he's a victim of it as well. Right?
I would argue that's how most people probably saw that.
Yeah. I agree, and it's how I saw it until I thought about it. And so I wonder, because we are very generous with Iroh. Like we just assume as Iroh is all wisdomous and knowing and smart and
don't you dare try to make me think otherwise.
Wisdomous, right? So I wonder if we give Iroh the credit here as well and say maybe he wasn't playing into the patriarchy. Maybe it was intentional.
Oh, so as you think about it, I think of it as Iroh's always been about balance.
Yeah.
Has always been about balance, and that's why we, the White Lotus and everything else that we know that comes to be true. And so does he feel like Zuko needs a little bit more of the fighter in him, and that Azula needs a little bit more of the kindness and caring in her, and that's why he gave those gifts the way he did.
And intent is important. Right, but also it is, regardless of intent, it is still reinforcing patriarchal values.
Correct.
But still, I wonder if it's more generous to read into it that he has seen Azula and knows what she's like and has seen her behavior, and she
does not
Zuko,
need a knife.
And yeah, she doesn't need a knife. She would, kill little animals and hide their bones in her closet because she's potentially a sociopath.
We don't know that. Someone send Ben a shirt that has Azula on it and says, "I can't diagnose her." That's what he needs.
I would wear it.
I know you would.
All right. Second thing I want to talk about, and last thing that I have on my list, is when they are called into Azulan's chambers, and Azulan asks Azula to demonstrate her firebending.
Well, I think Ozai presents that.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So I don't know if Azulan asked for it, but I think Ozai says
show us what you've learned.
Exactly. He's the one speaking, saying, show us what you learned, because you see that moment. All right, continue.
So it feels like Zuko can't accept that Azula is better than he is.
She also throws a little side jab his way.
And that's part of the reason, right? He can't accept being not as good as. Yeah. Right?
It's like when you and I play ping pong, you just don't love that I'm better at you at it.
That's a funny joke.
Continue.
Everyone, I'm better at ping pong.
Go ahead.
You're the one who derailed this into ping pong.
Continue, I'm sorry.
Admit your defeat.
I will not. Continue.
I'm better than you at ping pong. Anyway, so there's a book by Bessel van der Kolk. It's called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's about trauma.
Let the body keep the score. Let the body keep the score. Let the body keep the score. Let the body keep the
score. Max, everybody. Thanks for your contribution to this episode. That might have been traumatic for some of our listeners. But anyway,
I love a good Max joke. Just jumping in with punny music cues, little needle drops.
And so the book is about trauma and how the trauma affects the body. And it's interesting to me because Zuko is not as good at firebending as Azula. Azula is clearly very talented, and Zuko is very much seen as empathetic in this episode. When Azula tries to say like he's a loser and Iroh, excuse me, is a loser and he just came back because he's blah 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 blah. Zuko's like, no, he's probably just really hurt that his son died.
Yeah, first of all, like super empathetic for an 8-year-old.
Exactly,
like,
right?
Really,
that's really in touch with an adult's feelings.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we're comparing and contrasting, it feels like Zuko has probably taken on the anxiety and the stress of having to try and please his dad. And I wonder if that's affecting his bending. And the reason I say that is because he struggles with bending, and we see him struggle with it even as he practices with Iroh, even as he like, do it again, teach me, and he's still struggling to learn. He's clearly good, but I wonder if he is held back a little bit because of the trauma, little t trauma, that he has experienced over the course of his life that is in his body. And that's just a theory that I have. I wonder.
There are biological reactions to emotional and physical trauma that take place, and due to that, his bending could be worse because of that, and because of that moment.
And we see his bending grow, especially in the next season as he transforms with Aang, and it feels like he's going through a lot of acceptance with accepting himself and starting to eventually love and nurture himself in that season, and his bending improves.
Oh, absolutely.
So I just wonder.
Well, I think you're dead on. I think that's we know from working with kids as long as we have, there are physical responses to the way that kids interact or that their bodies show trauma. We know that from research, we know that from data, and so to say that that's the reason he's not performing well, I think is probably spot on. And something that I didn't think about.
But I can't diagnose because I'm not an expert.
That's true. We can't diagnose. We aren't experts. We're just people who read a lot and watch a lot of Avatar.
Those are both true things.
Those are accurate statements. We have a voicemail. If there's anything else that you don't want to say or you're rapping, Max Gongaware, want to jump in with anything that you've heard, anything that you want to add on to this?
No.
One day you're going to have something to add on, and I can't wait to hear it. One day.
He added on today.
Well, I mean, that was a little song.
Uh-huh.
Little song. All right, well, we will be right back with a voicemail, and then we will jump on into our devotion. Join us then.
You have reached the voicemail box of
Bending Not Breaking.
Please leave a message after the tone.
Hey, Sunshine and Ben. My name is Chris, and I'm really digging the podcast. Can't wait for more content. Something I look forward to each week. I appreciate the work you guys put into this. So I wanted to take a moment to share gratitude for the Avatar universe, because I feel like it's kind of helped me get a better grasp of who I am. Specifically, I'm grateful for Toph's character. I know you haven't gotten to the episode yet, but in the episode The Chase, we start to see Toph's character and attitude. Feels like she's grown up as fiercely independent because of the secret earthbending skills she held on to for so long. And even though that secret is no longer a secret, really, the independence is still there as what seems to me as kind of a crutch. I've had a similar experience where holding onto a secret has made it difficult to work in groups, and I just want to wish for everyone who has needed to lean into independence for emotional safety to know that they are not alone. Toph and I both have had to learn how to be part of a group, and I'm thankful for her struggle because I don't feel so alone. Anyways, thanks for the podcast, y'all. I can't wait to hear more, and look forward to hearing your answer, or your reflection, rather. Bye-bye.
Wow, Chris, thank you so much for that. I don't know if there's a more important message than you are not alone. I think that can be one of the most powerful things that you can tell someone else. And so thank you so much for being willing to share that and to share how Toph has played a role in your life. I think Ben and I completely understand these characters and how they can make us better people. I think that's kind of been the goal of this podcast, but to know that these characters have the ability to truly impact others in such a positive way, I think it's really important and something that's really cool about this show. So thank you for sharing that powerful message, because I think that that's not something we think about all the time.
No, I'm kind of taken aback because that's very similar to things that I've gone through, and I just really appreciate how we can all be a part of this together and learn and feel connected to each other through Avatar.
Thanks again, Chris. Thank you for sending it in. Thank you for taking the time. And if you would also like to share your story of impact, or your reflections, or your questions, or any of those things, please send us a voice memo to thearchive@gmail.com. We would love to have you on the show. Just keep sending those in. We love having them. Thank you so much for doing that. And again, thearchive@gmail.com is where you can send those. Before we wrap the episode today, it is time to do our weekly devotion, our reflection on how we are going to look at the lens. And this week we are doing that through the element of air. The element of air. So air and acceptance is what we're doing. Ben, what's your goal for the week?
So when I think about air and acceptance, I think about how they both start with the letter A, which is
alliteration.
Illiterate.
Also starts with the letter A. Did you
Don't
say
interrupt me.
Did you say it's illiterate?
I said alliterate, yeah. So what I've been thinking about is, like, the first thing that came to my mind is I wanted to be like a hurricane of acceptance and just create a wave across everyone who I came in contact with. But then I remembered the scale that we talked about at the beginning and how acceptance is not enough for me. And I want to, that led me to think about other things when it came to air. And I thought about what the Latin is for inspire, which is inspirare, which is essentially to breathe life into. And that's what I want to do. I want to breathe life into others and inspire them to be themselves and accept themselves so that they can get to the point where they can love themselves as fully as possible. And so a small step in the right direction is better than no steps in the right direction. And so small steps to change are steps in the right direction. And I want to help people move from pity, move from tolerance to acceptance, and then help them get further than that if possible.
I think in a similar vein, I think of the wind in the air as something we have to accept, right? Like, we don't get to change that outcome. We don't get to say that it doesn't exist. But for us, for the wind to be powerful, for it to do what it does best and create energy for us, or be a useful tool, it's in the way that we nurture that wind. And so thinking in the similar vein of the scale that we talked about earlier, how do I nurture others so that all the things that they are already get to be used in the best way possible to help create energy and power for others? And so that's kind of what I thought about when I thought about accepting and air. What are you going to do this week? Let us know. Tweet at us at the Archive, at the Archive, or at BNB_pod. BNB_pod is where you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. There's a lot of bonus content out there. You can donate to our Patreon at patreon.com/thearchive. That helps us keep these shows going, and there's also bonus content and bonus podcast on that. And is there anything else you'd like to share, Ben or Max, before we say goodbye for this week?
Send us voicemails.
Send us voicemails. Honestly, one of my favorite parts of what we get to do is hearing from y'all. So please, please, please send us a minute voicemail with something that you just want to add and contribute to the show, because we absolutely love having that. Max, anything from you? Anything you'd like to say?
Not at this time.
Well, Max, again, thank you for being here, and thank you for doing this, because this show wouldn't be nearly as good if you weren't a part of it.
I have faith in y'all.
Well, I mean, I think we do fine, but I think we're better when you're here.
Fine on a scale of what?
All right. Anyways, thank you so much. I am Sunshine Mayfield.
Ben Pruitt.
And you've been listening to Bending Not Breaking. Thank you for listening.
Cool.
Okay, goodbye.